Welcome back to EV News Daily. Coming up today, we'll talk zombie ice factories, VW's ID.1 and Nissan eyeing supply of South Korean batteries. Plus, stay tuned because later in the show, I'll tell you what a UK recovery service is saying about the reliability of EVs versus combustion cars. Well, good morning, good afternoon or good evening, wherever you're listening around the world. It's EV News Daily, your trusted source of EV information. Last working day of the week for Friday, 15th of March. I'm Martin Lee, and it's my job to go through every EV story that I can find, so you don't have to, like a TLDR of the EV world. We go live at 5 p.m. UK, that's midday Eastern, with the full podcast. Patreon supporters get the episodes, though, first, and as soon as they're ready, plus ad-free. Be like them by clicking on a link in the show notes. We'll start with news of a possible VW ID.1 arriving in 2027. Just over $20,000 is the price target. Volkswagen plans to begin production of its most economical EV, the ID.1. Maybe that's about 20,000 euros or UK pounds, about 22,000 US dollars. Aiming for 2027. Well, VW brand leader Thomas Schaefer highlighted the ID.1 as a milestone in making electric mobility accessible to all part of VW's annual press conference, media conference, if you like, a live stream that they did. You could watch us online. There's a few journalists turning up in person as well. A little Q&A session at the end, which is very intriguing. If you want to watch this, I'll pop a link in the show notes as well. It's a couple of hours long, but hey, nice way to kill time. Design and development of the ID.1 is already underway, they say, with the appearance of the car conceptualized. The big challenge, of course, is the economic feasibility of making small cars at low price points and to do it profitably, because the ID cars are profitable, and sort of dispelling that myth that you can't make money from EVs. But either way, they're looking for production locations of the ID.1. Discussions ongoing with companies like Renault about creating a small, affordable electric car for the mass market. They also work with Ford here in Europe as well. There could be a possible partnership there, but they did at their their big day, their big media day, reaffirm their commitment to electric vehicles. And, as I mentioned earlier this week on the podcast, I think it was, 2024 is the year of delivery for Volkswagen. There's 11 new models under the VW brand coming by 2027, and the ID.1 will be amongst them. And of course, that's really, really important for VW not to miss out on the cheaper cars that are coming. Again, earlier in the week, I told you about the Dacia Spring, version 2 of that, if you like, or the refreshed version. And that is coming to the UK in right-hand drive, and that's already the cheapest car on sale in Europe. It's coming here, and that's going to be a $14,995 car, £15,000 new car with really decent specs. And so VW can't miss out on that. They've also got the problem of China, of how to make cars there and sell them profitably as well. And will this small car come to the United States, for instance? Well, again, big decisions to be made there. But the ID.1, the ID.2, affordable, and yet still reasonably spacious because they're pure electric vehicles coming in the vein of the Polo, the Fox, if you got that there. Small Volkswagens that are really, really popular. Well, that shift from combustion to EV is affecting so many bits of the industry, and even really big players are affected in really big ways. One of those is a story about Hyundai that I found in today's Financial Times, well, on the website of that. It's behind the paywall, and so I won't give you the whole article. I'll be respectful to their journalism because they want that to be paid for. But I will let you know the essence of the story was about Hyundai investing $1.15 billion back in 2017 in a new factory in China with an annual production of 300,000 internal combustion engine cars. But the rapid transition of EV caught them with the pants down, as it were, and Hyundai had to sell the factory for less than a quarter of its initial investment. Analysts foreseeing many of these so-called zombie factories in China that were built before the EV boom, just before as well, that nobody could quite see coming. The speed and the rapid change, and for those of us that have been, I've been podcasting about EVs for 4, 5, 6 years, certainly a couple of thousand episodes in the archive of this daily podcast. And it can sound glib to be like, hey, we knew this transition was coming. But, car companies work on 10, 20, 30-year plans. And can you imagine signing off on this stuff, almost decades ago on your future future plans and then having to revise them so quickly. This overcapacity problem, the shift towards EVs has really caught so many companies unawares, and this example in the FT is the Hyundai issue. Last year in 2023, China's production of combustion cars dropped 37% from its peak in 2017. That's just an enormous decline in combustion cars, and foreign car brands facing intense competition from local companies like BYD, which offer very popular, very affordable cars with the tech that Chinese buyers want as well, resulting in a loss of market share for the traditional car makers, the Western car makers in there like Volkswagen. The shift has led to increased exports, and so some of these factories aren't completely shuttered or so-called zombie factories, but they're just making combustion stuff for the likes of Russia and Mexico for now, or countries that are a little bit behind the curve. And I'll pop a link to FT in the show notes. Now, whilst this change is going on around the world, the US is a really interesting place to look because, well, the US EV figures are behind Europe and China, and it's happening, but there's been some bumps in the road. And many times recently, I've hailed the Model Y and the success of Tesla's Model Y as the world's number one electric vehicle, number one passenger vehicle, and globally. But we don't get that data out of Tesla in terms of by model, by country, which is a shame. So we rely on third-party data. This report coming out of Automotive News last night, I saw that Tesla's Model Y trails Ford and their F-Series in terms of US sales. The Model Y didn't lead, wasn't the number one if you count the F-Series together, and also if you count Chevrolet and Ram pickups and even the Toyota RAV4. This is according to S&P Global Mobility's registration data. Model Y ranked 5th, they say, in total US registrations, but improves to 2nd when only retail registrations are included and not fleet. So that's kind of interesting, but it still trails the Ford F-Series vehicles, so the F-150, 250, 350, etc., if you clump them all together. In the realm of EV sales in the US, this data also saying today the leading models were, in descending order, Model Y, we know that. Model 3, we know it already. Chevy Bolt, talked about it so many times. It's the conundrum that General Motors have got. The Bolt sells well. They just killed it off. Mustang Mach-E, ID.4, Ioniq 5, then the Model X, Rivian R1S, and then Ford F-150 Lightning and the Kia EV6. So usual suspects as you would expect. Next up, we'll talk about a success story with a new entrant into the EV market. That is the SU7 from mobile phone consumer electronics company, if you want to call them that, Xiaomi, entering the automotive space with its first EV, the SU7. The official reveal of the SU7 we found out earlier this week will be, date for your diary, March 28th. Test drive starting a few days earlier with customers. And ahead of the launch, the SU7 has attracted significant interest. They say in the last couple of days, 100,000 reservations of this in China, maintaining their reputation for affordability, Xiaomi say, with the SU7 offering it in two versions starting at equivalent of $35,000 US for the rear-wheel drive version of this low-slung, sleek, sports car-looking SU7 with its 101 kilowatt-hour battery from CATL. And it's a $35,000 equivalent car. I know it's really hard to do that conversion from China to US sometimes, but I'll try and give you an illustration. A direct competitor to Tesla's Model S for so little money in comparison. Remarkable performance promised, not at the base price, but the higher spec cars will do a sub 3 second 0 to 60 and be built on an 800 volt architecture as well for extremely fast charging. We will look forward to seeing a full reveal of that. While I mentioned this at the top of the show, Nissan's in discussions with South Korean SK On as a potential supplier for their EVs in the US. The move is part of Nissan's strategy to widen their battery providers way beyond Envision AESC, the Chinese company who they use at the moment. It's to identify at least a secondary battery production source within the US ecosystem, if you like, to align with some of those Inflation Reduction Act stipulations of where batteries batteries are made and where the materials are sourced from. And as we discussed yesterday, Nissan is also exploring collaborative efforts with Honda for joint procurement of parts, aiming to fortify partnerships and boost competitiveness in the EV market, particularly in China as well. Goodness, again, I mentioned being a glib podcaster, but wouldn't it have been interesting to have this story on the podcast 4 or 5 years ago? Such was the need to form these partnerships, which some companies were doing. Go back 10 years, and we're talking about Tesla making their own batteries, along with Panasonic, of course, but raw materials turning up by the truckload at the Nevada Gigafactory, which was getting no attention at the time, and Tesla building up all of those smarts and skills on making their own batteries alongside their partners, of course. It seems so late, that's the wrong word to use, for Nissan to be talking about, hey, maybe we need a different battery supply. It's never too late. It's an ongoing thing. I don't mean to criticize at all, but maybe I'm just trying to highlight the enormous challenge that some of the established OEMs are facing. Now, staying with battery news, and NIO, the Chinese EV maker, entering into an agreement with the battery maker and the world's biggest EV battery maker, CATL, to create batteries boosting extended lifespans to reduce, again, EV vehicle cost, a key part of driving down costs, and make those batteries not only perform better, but last longer. The collaboration intends on harnessing each company's battery tech and skills to decrease what they call full life cycle costs, especially significant for the operational expenses of NIO and their extensive network of battery swapping and charging stations. Now, my YouTube viewers will be looking at a nice little picture of a NIO EP9 on screen right now, the crazy hypercar that is sort of just otherworldly. But back in the real world, NIO do have a range of mainstream, middle class, and a little bit cheaper family cars as well that relies on their battery swapping network. And in a move to make EV ownership more affordable, NIO going down that route of reducing the purchase price of the EV by allowing you to then pay for the battery on a monthly ongoing cost. In fact, they've recently, or will shortly, decrease their monthly battery rental fees up to 33% for some of its users. Despite the partnership, NIO plans to continue their own investment in their own development of core technologies like battery tech alongside the investment with CATL. To innovate, NIO have already commercialized that 150 kilowatt hour semi-solid state. We talk about solid state batteries are kind of like a nirvana, but this is a semi-solid state battery through another partnership they've got with that impressive range of up to 620 miles. And again, when we talk about China cars, they might be referring to the CLTC, which is not real world, but either way, an impressive range with new battery tech coming just around the corner, but a big investment here on future battery technology. All right, let's get into Tesla next then. Here's a story that I've been mulling over for days, if not weeks, and not really wanted to touch because this isn't a financial podcast. It's far from it, by the way, and it's a real shame that a great resource that I love to listen to, which was a chap called Rob Maurer. He had a podcast called Tesla Daily. I used to enjoy that back when it was audio only, long before he put it on YouTube. And that sadly, he ceased that recently, saying that his job was done. But it comes at a time where he ceases his coverage of a real struggle for Tesla, and they are facing many headwinds in 2024, which they've self-admitted on their own earnings calls. But one of the because they're a bellwether, when they struggle, they get talked about more because we don't talk about the financial earnings calls of all companies. In fact, I try to stay away from the Tesla financial stuff as well because there's far more experts out there than I am. But I can't help but read so much news on recent financial analysis from those experts that cover this, those big corporate investors and the institutional investors, I should say, revising their delivery forecasts for Tesla in Q1 and also for 2024, signaling a slowdown in what was otherwise seen as a large growth company, and of course had a valuation of all the other world's big car makers all added together. Well, Tesla tries to be seen as a multi-vertical company. So, we are a solar company, an energy company, a storage company, a car company. AI is the latest buzzword, and so it's I do smile when I keep hearing every company under the sun to be like, hey, we're an AI company, and that's just the thing. And what was it 5 minutes ago, NFTs or something, and I'm sure AI will settle down and everyone will find their lane. But the latest thing is, Tesla's an AI company. We've got lots of smarts in that area. After years of 50% annual growth in vehicle sales, Tesla said on the last earnings call that they are revising that down, that they're not going to be a growth company until the affordable model comes, whatever that's called, the Model 2 or whatever it is. Deutsche Bank, for instance, adjusting their Q1 delivery predictions to Tesla for 427,000 vehicles. That's an enormous cut from what some people were thinking that they would do. And bearing in mind, I've been saying they're going to make more than 2 million vehicles this year. And it looks like they might fall well short of that. UBS revised their Q1 delivery forecast from 466,000 to 432,000 vehicles, and similar revisions have happened. Many stock downgrades as well from various firms. The consensus seems to be now sort of 425 or 435,000 vehicles delivered in this quarter. Interesting to think about because, like I say, Tesla are a bellwether. They have an outsized market share in the US, but not outside of the US. So we watch it with interest because they do tend to get noticed more by just the wider public. And if Tesla are going through a period of non-growth and not doing so well, that could affect the conversations that people are having around EVs in general. One of those people that I like to follow online, and I try and follow a range of voices and then make my own mind up, not just focus on one part of the conversation. So try and find those people who are absolutely all in with electric vehicles and Tesla, etc. And I try and find a variety of voices of people who might not be wanting to move to EVs as quick. And have they got something to say? And can I learn from that as well? One of those chaps, Ross Gerber, a long-standing Tesla investor who is very, very pro-Tesla, is always online talking about, I don't follow him day in, day out, but always talking about how amazing the company is and how they're changing the world. Recently, completely changed his tune. And his criticism is of the CEO, who's spreading himself very thin with launching rockets and running social media companies and Tesla as well, and emphasizing that perhaps Tesla needs a kind of Tim Cook figure, someone who is less the visionary founder and more someone who can be the CEO, who focuses on delivery. And that's an interesting conversation that's also happening. I've seen a lot online as well. Tesla shares are the worst performing right now in the S&P 500, plummeting over 36% since the beginning of the year. Wells Fargo reducing their stock price target down, saying it could go as low as $44. And that is all part of this conversation that I think will filter through to not just Tesla, but like I say, it affects the EV industry in general. If there's a general kind of stink and negativity around Tesla, it filters out. Now, there's lots of voices in this space, again, that I try and learn from. I'm sure watchers and viewers and listeners of this podcast, some will have a range of opinions, and I would welcome you to comment below so I can soak it all up and then make my own mind up. And I'd love to hear from various people in the comments of the YouTube show. Of course, I presume you're subscribed to the show already, right? On audio forms and also on YouTube. Well, it's free. You might as well. But also, always leave a comment or send an email to hello@evnewsdaily.com, and I'd love to hear from you. Now, a growing story coming out of Australia has been Tesla, then Polestar, and now a really big one, Volkswagen, leaving the Australian auto lobby's policy group following a disagreement of the future in terms of what the auto industry is lobbying for to Aussie policymakers. Volkswagen has dramatically stepped away from the Federal Chamber of Automotive Industries, the FCAI committee in Australia, advocating for robust fuel efficiency standards as beneficial to the country. The decision trails the departure of Tesla and Polestar from that organisation. Tesla criticised the organisation for disseminating false and misleading statements regarding the effect of fuel efficiency, saying that we can make existing cars better and we don't need to go to EV as quickly. Volkswagen's resignation occurs at exactly the same time as Toyota threw their backing behind this lobby organisation, and in reaction to the fellow automakers leaving, Toyota reaffirmed their commitment, FCAI also reaffirming their support for not zero emissions, but just a slightly better version of what we've got at the moment, trying to make the existing polluting technology still polluting, but just a little bit better, and rather than trying to go zero emission, appealing to the government to reassess the timing, structure and trajectory of the emissions regulations. Now, Toyota, in its submission, the governmental submission, Toyota arguing that the proposed emissions reduction objectives were excessively ambitious, and why should we try and clean up the air, particularly for future generations, particularly for our children who are breathing in disgusting air pollution. No. Let's not have anything that's too excessively ambitious, and also that the fines for surpassing these limits, let alone doing the right thing, which is cleaning up the air that we breathe, but also the financial penalties that would hit Toyota in the pocket were, and I quote, too severe. You won't be surprised to hear that I'm off Toyota's Christmas card list. I'm not sure they're on mine. Well, two more stories before we head towards the weekend, and we'll talk about EV reliability. A UK-based breakdown service reporting that EVs are 59% less likely to require roadside assistance than combustion engine vehicles. The study covered EVs from new to 10 years old, demonstrating that over 1 million EVs on the UK roads is now a really decent data point to say that there's a much lower risk of breakdowns in an EV, offering reassurance to potential EV buyers who might have read things in the media in the last year or so that apparently there's problems with electric vehicles. We know the reasons why those stories are being placed in the media. The managing director of Start Rescue, Lee Puffett, said that the hesitation towards EV adoption is purely psychological, and to reassure if anybody that wants to go EV that concerns about battery life and vehicle reliability are all unfounded. And this is from a company that is there to rescue combustion vehicles off the side of the road. Contrary to common beliefs about battery deg, similar to that of, mobile phones or your laptop where the battery starts to go, EV batteries, as we know, are designed on an entirely different scale to those small-scale lithium-ion batteries. You know this, I know this, but it's something worth pointing out as well, that over time, EVs do see battery degradation, but nowhere near what we see from small consumer electronics, because the thermal management, the BMS is all on an entirely different scale. But there is one battery in an EV that can cause particular issues, and well, that would be the 12 volt. We'll finish off today by talking about plug-in electric vehicles having this much lower incidence of breakdown call-outs as opposed to petrol and diesel vehicles. The Association of Fleet Professionals talking today about one issue that you do need to be mindful of. This is according to the fleetnews.co.uk website. They point out that the 12-volt battery in electric vehicles can be an issue, but also they're seeing an issue with electric vans, where unexpected drainage is being reported when vehicles aren't used very often. The 12 volt is essential for powering up the vehicle, often unlocking it with the key fob and actually getting the traction battery to turn on. But the dashboard, the lights, the wipers, all of that is all of those parts, the supply chain, that's all a 12 volt supply chain. That's why we have a 12 volt battery, and that will change in time. But electric vehicles not only require less emergency breakdown, but they do sometimes require maintenance on the 12 volt. I've had it a couple of times with the Hyundai Kona, once with the MGs at SEV, and that was when the MG was plugged in, but we went on holiday for a week and we came back, and I just needed to do the old top up on the 12 volts booster battery. But EVs aren't without problem, but they are much, much more reliable. Well, that's your podcast for today. Thank you so much for listening and watching this week. I might do some weekend audio editions of the podcast. I've got loads of stories that I didn't even get time to get to. So, yeah, I think we'll do a Saturday and Sunday audio show if I possibly can. But for your main shows this week, thank you very much for being part of the audience. Hopefully it's useful. And if you do find it useful, you'd like your podcast first and ad-free, you can join up on Patreon. That's patreon.com/EV News Daily. As always, a regular mention for our premium partners: Porsche of the Village in Cincinnati, Audi of Cincinnati East, Volvo Cars of Cincinnati East, National Car Charging on the US mainland and Aloha Charge in Hawaii, Derek Riley from Nevo.ie and the Nevo EV Review Island YouTube channel, Octopus Electroverse, global public charging made simple with one app and one map, and Lease Plan Electric Moments. All the tools and guidance EV drivers need. Have a good one. See you Monday, maybe at the weekend for the audio edition only. Otherwise, have a good one. Oh, and remember, there's no such thing as a self-charging hybrid.